Thank you. A very warm welcome to you. My name is Florian Bauhuber. This is me on the picture. And I'm a digital immigrant. Who of you is still able to make a connection between these two things? A pencil and a tape? Around 50% of you. You know, in a distant past, we used pencils to repair or rewind tapes that had a problem with the magnetic band. This is when I was born. Today, we don't have problems with tapes anymore. These, what you see here, are the biggest fears people face today. Your battery is low, no Wi-Fi, things like that. Okay, I see you share my fears. These are the fears of our modern times. As I said, the battery's low, the page is not loading, no Wi-Fi connection. As a digital immigrant that I am, I still claim to have become a digital leader. This is a precondition for change. However, if you look at the figures that various stakeholders gather in the market, then here they are. The internet economist Holger Schmidt has put one figure on the internet. This is from a survey, and he says that only 7% of German managers are what we call digital leaders. And I would assume that it is the same in other countries, be it in Austria, in Switzerland, or in other European countries. Only a small share of our managers are digital leaders, or even people who are interested enough in technology and digital technology that they could rightfully call themselves digital leaders. This is data taken from a CRISP research survey. And if you take a look at the numbers, you will see that there is a difference between digital leaders and non-digital leaders, and this is their mindset. This means digital leaders don't just use digitization at work and in their private life, but they use it wherever they are. These are people who live in a digitized world in any dimension, and they don't just consider it a duty. So why are only 7% of our managers digital leaders? The first problem that I identify is that we still live in a society where we have a lot of people who are just, let's say, keeping up digitally, and others who are digitally excluded. And we only have 31% of digital pioneers. 2/3 of Germans are lagging behind. And then there's a second problem. Many people, when they are asked for their self-assessment, would say that they are indeed digital leaders because they have all the digital experience, but at the same time, an external assessment would reveal a different story. Many people, when they're managers, think they are automatically digitally literate. But when you ask their colleagues and team members, which is what one survey did, they asked about the digital leadership skills of managers. You see here that there is quite a gap between the self-assessment and the external assessment when it comes to the digital leadership skills of our managers. But if you want to be successful as a company today, you have no choice but to become a digital leader. And at the end of the day, we need digital leaders that work in a realm of digital leadership culture. What would that be? Digital leadership or digital leadership culture? What is the difference between this and innovation culture? I don't think that difference would be too big. Really? Digital leadership is a lot about innovation because much of the innovation happens in connection to digitization. And we see that in the world that surrounds us. We have created what we call this circular model. And when we look at the different stakeholders and the organizational cultures, we always come back to the human being as a factor, and we realize the importance of the attitude of human beings. If you want to be successful in the digital world, when you communicate with consumers, with your customers, you need to have the right attitude. And that attitude has to be anchored in the organization. This attitude has to be consistent, it has to be in line with your brand, and it has to be real. Now, what do I mean by attitude? Attitude relates to values that matter to an organization, and attitude are values that the different people in an organization hold dear. When I prepared for my presentation, I asked my social graph, what does digital leadership mean for you? And I actually asked, I promised the people I asked to show their answers here on stage. And here they are. Michael Buller answered, it's about curiosity and flexibility to also question your own business model. Nicole Zenewald said, leadership is all about inspiring people and creating trust. Manuel Kliese says, the greatest extent of openness. Tanja Neumann says, there has to be courage to make mistakes. And then Imke Wemken, who I think is present, said, you need a sense of humor and diplomatic skills. And then I try to break it down to the underlying values to find out how that attitude is made up. And this relates to both to the person and to the brand. Here you see the Olympic map, which is normally used to give people an overview of, let's say, a company, a system, or even of individuals. This very model was developed by Gruppe Nymphenburg. They used brain research data to create this model. And here you see different values and where they are located. And you can also use that to describe an innovation culture. Now, if you go back to these statements, we could use them to identify values and then put them in the limbic map. Things like curiosity, flexibility, fun, openness, courage, tolerance, and then a sense of humor. Now, if you mark them on the map, you get a rather clear picture. And a certain position becomes clear. Now, you might say, this is all a long shot. You just take some Facebook comments and then try to pick out some values to define a leadership culture. Yeah, maybe you're right. But I don't think that it's just my social graph who deems these values to be important, but that other stakeholders would agree. If you want to be a digital leader, these are the values that you have to incorporate or impersonate even. If you look at what the big players are doing, Google, Facebook, and others, then look at this. It's a press statement on the HR strategy of Google. And this tells you the following. Many companies don't even invite candidates who are not the best in terms of marks. And Google has identified that this is the wrong approach. And Google explicitly goes out looking for people who share their values. This is a statement by Laszlo Bock, who says, "We need people who enjoy finding solutions to unanswered questions." Which means they're not looking for the top performers, for the optimizers, for the most disciplined people, but they are looking for people who have the passion and a joy when they try to find solutions. And this is also what I found out when I asked my social graph. If you apply this system to human beings, you see that we are not talking about the top performers, the traditionalists, or the disciplined poster boys and girls, but digital leaders are, let's say, on the other side. They stand for certain values. Now, what is the problem we face, not only in the tourism industry, but in more general terms? Many of today's leaders have been prepared and socialized in their jobs when other values were more important, when other values were considered relevant for leadership. And you find them on the right-hand side here, on this graph. Honor, performance, diligence, obedience, duty, obligation, safety, tradition. Depending on the industry you're talking about, you will find yourselves in this lower right part of the graph. This is how we were brought up. Who of you would call yourself a manager, or let's say executive? 50% perhaps? And I think you would share my impression. If you look at the standards used to measure the success of your work, very often the values indicated here will be applied, and not the ones I mentioned before. And this is precisely the problem. I would like to give you a real-life example to illustrate what I'm saying. When we started out, we lived a lot in line with the values that I just showed you. We wanted to perform, go to our limits, work as much as we could, and in that process we killed all the innovative spirit that was there. As a consequence, 3 years ago, we fundamentally changed our approach within our company. We redefined the values that matter to us. We redefined what we are and who we want to be. And these are the values that we think are important for the future of tourism and our work in that field. And I promise I didn't ask my Facebook group first, but we came up with this, and it was confirmed by the social graph. And you see how these values overlap. We now use these values whenever we communicate externally. And when we hire colleagues, or when we work with colleagues, we don't just look at their performance, but we pay a lot of attention to the values that they share and that they need to be digital leaders. We have a 3-phase process for recruiting new team members. And in that process, we try to figure out whether this person shares our values. There are 2 different personality tests to start with. Then there are 2 conversations with the managing directors, that is me in this case. There will be 2 meetings with other team members so that they can find out whether this is indeed a digital leader. Then there is a hangout with all of the team members. And then there is a very special component of that process, which is we try to learn about the private life of potential co-workers. We go and visit them at home. We have a look at the place where they live, and then we'll see whether these people are really open-minded. And if they respond in a way that they say, oh, you want to come and visit me at home? Then this also tells me something. The idea behind all of this is, if you want to be innovative, and if you aim at being an innovative leader, the only way of achieving that is having the right people on board. These people are my resources, and they are the ones to bring about innovation. So we don't really look at what they do, but we look at the values, things like trust, the fact that they enjoy this type of work. And we want to give them a platform where they can apply these values. All of this leads to innovation automatically. You can look at the example of Katrin Fischer. She organized a video summit all on her own because she was interested. You know, video is not my topic, really. And I would never have been able to inspire other people and convince them to support me with that project. But my colleague has that intrinsic motivation and that interest. She drives that topic without me having to monitor what she's doing. And even less tell her what she's supposed to do. Or there's another example. An e-learning platform for destinations was developed by one of my colleagues. To me, it's all rocket science. I have no idea about it, but this innovation happened intrinsically. Or then there is Michael. He set up his own tourism academy simply because he thought it was an important thing to do. So what I'm saying is it depends very much on the individual stakeholders. They're not being controlled, they are not told what they're supposed to do, but they do it on their own. And of course this means that mistakes happen, but that's just fine. What matters here is tolerance. If I ask for digital leadership, I have to accept that mistakes happen. And as Oscar Wilde said, experience is the name everybody gives to their mistakes. And I tell you, mistakes very often lead to new experiences, which can be used as a basis for further development and innovation. Now, many here might say, yeah, perhaps this is something that works for you, because you have that small team and you have flat hierarchies and so on. It would never work for us because we are in that very hierarchical system. But I would say this is only correct to some extent. We see from other companies in this business that it is possible to create such a culture, even in a bigger company. And we've seen examples that this can be successful. We have 3 customers, Trivago, Motor One, and Upstalsboom. They all have very flat hierarchies within their organizations, and they've managed to give their staff enough leeway and room for maneuvering so that they can experiment and make their mistakes. They draw on the values that I just mentioned, and they use them systematically, although you might consider these very traditional hospitality organizations. And although there are managers and executives who grow up, let's say, in the old times, but still, they have turned into organizations that leave a mark on the travel industry. When you hear about innovative companies today, these 3 will be among them. And this means it's not about technology as such. What really matters are the people who work that technology, people who realize all the opportunities offered by the technology. But you still need the people in the first place. And then we have Trivago. Perhaps you have read about this. They are growing at breathtaking speed. And still, they have managed in a very short period of time to integrate hundreds of new colleagues also with flat hierarchies and a very strong innovation culture. And they've been so successful because they pay attention to whom they recruit. They have a very strong focus on their HR strategy and on what people believe, and not just on what they are able to do. And then all the other, let's say, the technical skills are developed on the job. I was also wondering whether there would be any tourist destinations that I could list here as an example. But to be honest, I couldn't really find one. Which tells me that there is still a lot of work to do. There might be one or two good examples. Imke mentioned East Frisia, where some people have been very creative to develop the region. They've also made this clip about East Frisia Second, which is a satirical response to President Trump always putting America first. And this might be a destination where there is a strong innovation culture, flat hierarchies, and many of the staff is chosen based on their values, not necessarily on their work experience or not based on who they are related to. So what I'm saying is there still is room for improvement when it comes to destinations and their digital leadership skills. I brought you this cartoon, which is very telling. Many people call for change. They say they want things to be different, but when it really comes to changing, then they are not that enthusiastic anymore. And that's normal. It's a normal reaction, and I don't judge it. After all, these values are also related to physical functions. The limbic map is also related to the physical preconditions of a human being. If you want to be innovative and open-minded, in some cases you simply can't. For example, if your body doesn't allow you to. So please don't become obsessed about this, but try to figure out what could be a good strategy for your organization. Do you really have to be innovative? And if, as a destination or as a player, you want to be a digital leader, work on your human resources. Taking into account that there are even certain limits here. So it's all a matter of strategy. The question is, where do you want to go? What do you want to achieve as an organization? What do you want for your brand and for your company in the future? Perhaps you don't have to be a digital leader, and you don't have to become a digital top destination. But you have to practice what you preach, be it your brand or your identity. And as a consequence, you have to develop your human resources in a value-based way. Thank you.